And what I've learned over time is all of these things are structures that run concurrently. And there is no one structure that answers everything. It's more about having multiples around, multiples within. And this is why we want to have the multiple tools within the self to understand what's going on and to be able to navigate successfully within that. I think now is a useful time to let you guys know the lineage of my own training and how I moved from one area and topic into the next. So I started off back in 2009 with learning several feminine hands-off healing modalities. Reiki would probably be, the easiest one that most people have probably heard reference to. But these are all energetic healing modalities. They're working with the energetic form, the spiritual body, and they're hands-off insofar as you're just working with the space of an individual. And within Reiki and these similar sorts of trainings, we learn that we have a mental body, an emotional body, and a physical body. And this is a basic structure. This becomes like the real core of the energy body system that I'll be sharing later. But then when I was doing my own reading and my own research and my own personal development, particularly when I came across Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, which is a book I very much recommend. It's all about the ego. That was a real game changer for me, because when it came to mental body energy within the healing spheres, nobody really seemed to have more specific detail about mental body energy. It was just a bandwidth that was there and it wasn't really defined. Whereas there was an awful lot more conversation about emotional healing and how that would work and how that ran through the system. So it became naturally my area of interest was the mental body energy. And then this alongside with particularly books the likes of Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, when he spoke about the ego and the mind, and the ego as being this internal system that we had to learn how to control and master really to a certain extent. And this is where another layer came in, which is this whole concept of transcending the mind. And this is where I found a great difficulty. So much of the spiritual teachings tell you to, get over your mind and to collapse the mind, and almost this concept of leave it behind. And that didn't really make that much sense to me in the way that it was being suggested, or the language that was being used, or the frames of reference that it was coming from. Because we're always going to have a mind. Our life is lived within this mental space, and this mental space of our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, our moods, our attitudes, our beliefs, our morals, our values. All of these are attributes of the mind, our mental system, and indeed our mental health. We talk about modern mental health, people not being able to cope with the reality of the world because how the world is, how they feel, how they're meant to be, are all juxtaposing off each other, and it's very crunchy. It's not really running very smoothly. Whereas I think a more realistic sentence to put to it is that we want to learn how to, not control the mind, but we want to evolve the mind into a more evolved, cleaner house, better way of thinking, personal energetic hygiene, spiritual hygiene, mental hygiene. We want to have good thoughts, good intentions. But there's also certain processes that happen within the mind, especially when you're developing spiritually, and you'll realize that you have all of these layers of subconscious thoughts, and we have to honor where we are and allow ourselves to go through the process, as opposed to treating the mind as if it is, the enemy that we have to beat. It's the friends that we have to get to know, and we have to, reframe its references. So, sorry now, I sort of moved from the feminine healing modalities into more of the wondering about the mechanics of the mind. And I did a bit of Theta practitioner training there. I found that very useful, and that was a keystone really. But also getting into different types of meditation, and this really opened me up as well then into consciousness. Consciousness I can now frame reference as being the masculine element of our spiritual energetic structure. We have, the flow as the feminine, and then we have our consciousness. And when you can inlay your consciousness into your flow, well, then you've got an operational unit that is going to be able to do things. But we can distinguish these two things as being separate from each other, and then we learn how to heal the feminine and how to operate the masculine, how to call in the masculine, how to embody the masculine, and the same with the feminine. You know, for a lot of people in the world, as I see it, depending on what's going on for them as an individual, there's an absence of the masculine, and people like not being able to live with that or grapple or find themselves with their headspace. So when we consider, you know, consciousness as an energetic, a specific type of energy, the masculine form of energy, then that becomes something that we can work with. And when we're working within this Going Dotty system, this is all just the educational resource really, and it's not really a system as such. It's just this is the way that I'm going to be sharing the things that it is that I can share. When it comes to consciousness, that was just then became something that became a natural derivative. We're going to be talking about the geometry of things, masculine and feminine, and again, we'll all have frameworks and frames of reference in the future for that to make a little bit more sense. So we started off with the feminine healing, then we got into the mental body specifically, then began discovering consciousness, conscious constructs, how consciousness operates within our system. There was certain meditation techniques that I trained in and I developed within myself. And then within all of this, something that became very apparent to me was this element of co-creation, you know, and this is why I feel like the toxic ego and narcissist series is so relevant, because I think a lot of people are going to be struggling with their own energetic life because of the toxicity of other people that is hampering their own feminine energy or their own masculine conscious construct. And this concept of the geometry of how it all works together, the geometry of our own energy body. There is this narrative of we are, you know, embodying our light body, and our actual energetic system is upgrading, it's evolving, and we are morphing and changing rapidly at this time. And it's almost like I've done that really quintessential thing where, you know, so much of the spiritual training is like go with the flow, trust the universe, you know, don't logic it down, don't break it down in the mind. Well, I've broken it down because I needed to, you know, I needed a structure beyond the angels and the fairies then to be able to, you know, reasonably hold on to. And I've nothing necessarily against the angels or the fairies, and if they're there, I hope this doesn't come back to me in some like negative way or whatever. But, you know, everything that they say not to do is essentially what I've done, because first of all, because it just makes sense. You know, we need to have a little bit of a logical system and structure for things. It's too much to just say things will come in their own good time. That, to my mind, personally, isn't as responsibly accountable as it could be. And, you know, if there's 1,000 people not doing this sort of linear, logical work, then I don't see the harm in one person given a certain amount of their time to do that linear, logical work that will benefit others afterwards. You know, this is really all about the like little umbrellas that you can put out there that help other people. And what I've learned over time is all of these things are structures that run concurrently. And there is no one structure that answers everything. It's more about having multiples around, multiples within. And this is why we want to have the multiple tools within the self to understand what's going on and to be able to navigate successfully within that, especially if we're going through a process of moving from one system to another system. And these things, to my mind, you know, they all really fit in together really well, because my penultimate question when I started, and my very, very, very penultimate question when I did my very first course was always at the time, you know, I was just always so interested in the soul. What is the soul? Why is it? How is it? Where is it? Why is it the way that it is? How does it operate? How does it work? Why is it like this? I'm just the person who's always had like 1,000 questions. And, you know, again, this kind of constantly asking specific questions for layers of detail isn't often valued within the industry. You know, people don't want to be answering an industry that says go with your intuition, go with the flow, go with the moment. And I just don't buy any of that. You know, we're all people. We have to be able to reasonably live within the geometry of the moment. There are very real things that occur to us when we're in quantum time and space with other people. And I suppose I share that which it is that I learned, either because I had to learn it personally for my own sense of mental awareness and having a solid mental structure as opposed to just believing something that I couldn't quantify, or because I came across what I consider to be major gaps within the system, major questions that just weren't being asked, and nobody seemed to think that there was a value in answering them. And all of these topics together, you know, to my mind, it fits into the structure of, you know, what is happening to the soul, you know, within the collective of humanity, within the collective of the Western world, and then within the individual soul units and bodies of people at this time. If you're really interested, I would consider, in healing, then there are certain larger frames of reference that you have to be able to have a grip on. And I don't really think that any of semblance of understanding our superconscious structure is actually outside of our grasp, because the superconscious, you know, is the larger and it's the greatest peripheral that we can have. But there are structures out there that offer explanation to that. And really, once you have those structures and you've integrated those structures as much as you want to, as much as you need to, then you can navigate within it as freely as you desire. So that's it. I hope you found it useful. Please let me know in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys again. Thanks for your time.